It is time to set those waivers for week number 6 in your season-long fantasy football leagues. And we are here to answer your questions and get you set for that run of waivers going tonight. My name is Jim Sannes. I am a senior writer and analyst for NumberFire.com, joined here as always by JJ Zachariason, editor-in-chief of NumberFire and FanDuel. JJ, we are on to week number 6. How are you doing today?
I'm good. A lot of injuries this week. I feel like my entire 15 transactions column was just like on running backs. Like I tried to like force talking about. I mean, there's Kadarius Toney, and then I had like AJ Brown as a buy, but it's just there wasn't that much to talk about with wide receivers. It's just a very big running back week.
It's rough. The good thing is we do get Christian McCaffrey back this week. That's a positive. We get closer to Dalvin Cook and Joe Mixon being healthier. So at least there are some positives, but a lot to digest here, and we will break it all down for you in just one second. First, a quick reminder to make sure you are getting your questions in no matter where you are watching. We'll take questions via YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, or Twitter. No matter where you're watching, you can get your questions in. We'll take them live here on air to help you get those waivers set. And while you're there, make sure you are subscribed and come back here. We are live Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, talking NFL here on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages. Let's start things off with Alvin over on YouTube. He had Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but CEH just put on IR right now. He had Zach Moss, Dalvin Cook, and Alexander Mattison. But would you trade Chris Godwin for Kareem Hunt in half PPR? So Chris Godwin fighting with Mike Evans and Antonio Brown for targets, but Kareem Hunt due for some pretty serious touchdown regression here in the near future, I would assume, for Cleveland. So, JJ, would you trade Chris Godwin for Kareem Hunt in Alvin's situation?
I mean, I don't think it's like a bad trade. I think it's a fair enough trade. So if you want to do that, you can do that. I don't understand the end of that. I see Ridley's on bye. Who is C. David? Is it Corey Davis?
Corey Davis, yeah.
Yep. So, I do think that leaves your wide receivers a little bit thin. And so I might say no to it from that standpoint. But again, I think that Hunt and Godwin are sort of in the same tier within their position where, they both have nice floors each week. They obviously have touchdown upside each week as well. But, as you noted, Jim, Kareem Hunt is a big touchdown regression candidate. I wrote about it in my 15 transactions column this week. I spoke on it on my podcast. I know that, I said the same thing last week, and then he came out and had this like 26-point performance. But I think that we need context with that. And the context is that it was like a 90-point game, and we can't expect a 90-point. Like if I were guaranteed that Kareem Hunt was going to play in a 90-point game every week, yeah, he'd be the RB. He'd be like a top 2 running back for me from here on out. So we can't assume that, of course. But then the other thing that I looked at was historically over the last 10 years, running backs and their rushing touchdowns divided by their total team offensive touchdowns. And Kareem Hunt's rate, so it's basically touchdown share, but only looking at rushing touchdowns. Yeah, his touchdown share in that offense is one that has only been hit by 21 running backs over the last 10 years. So there's like 2 of them per season. Of those 21 running backs, the vast majority of them, the average among that group, basically had twice as much of a running back rush share as Kareem Hunt currently has, and they had 7 more attempts per game than Kareem Hunt currently has. Why? Because volume leads to touchdowns. Volume is what drives everything in fantasy football. And while Kareem Hunt is still seeing a decent enough amount of volume, it's still not to this point of like, he's this full-blown RB1. So I know that I went on a little bit of a tangent there, but I think that what I'm trying to say is that Godwin and Hunt still sort of in a level playing field. I think a lot of people would look at this and say, just go take Kareem Hunt because he's out, he's an RB1 in fantasy. Running backs are more scarce than wide receivers are, but I think that this is a pretty even trade. But given the wide receivers that are left on your team, I don't know if I would do it. And I like Zach Moss too. He was a buy for me this week. They have a really good schedule upcoming.
Yeah, your running backs aren't too bad, Alvin. And I would say too, like Toney with that ankle injury, I might be a little bit wary about depleting wide receiver depth there. And also with Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb has actually had he's had more red zone chances than Kareem Hunt every week has ever won. The one week he did not was week 2 where they had the same number. So eventually that pendulum was going to swing back towards Chubb, and that's going to hurt Hunt there. So Alvin, I think you're actually okay at running back right now. That's my assessment there.
Yeah, Kareem Hunt, four goal line rushes this year, 3 touchdowns. Nick Chubb, 6 goal line rushes, 1 touchdown. I mean, this is not going to keep up at this pace through the rest of the season.
Regression. Let's talk to Daniel on YouTube. Are you worried with TJ Hockenson's usage the past 3 weeks? TJ Hockenson, JJ banged up, and I feel like we're seeing some effect of that. So what's your worry level with TJ Hockenson right now?
Kind of worried. I mean, I think that you have to be a little bit worried after he was like a top 2 tight end. I mean, he's like the tight end after the first couple of weeks. And then, the last 3 weeks, he's basically been a tight end 3 in fantasy. And so you have to be worried in some way for sure, because his target shares aren't matching the usage. And I say usage from the standpoint of snaps and routes run. If you look at his snaps and his routes run data, pretty identical to weeks 1 and 2. There's really not that much that's different. I think that what we're seeing is he played a little over his head early in the season. He's in an offense that doesn't have a lot of alternatives. And so defenses can key in on Hockenson. I mean, that's not the end. I mean, it's not a death sentence for him. And no offense to you, Jim, but Jared Goff is not elite by any means.
No offense anymore.
Yeah,
we're good.
So you have a poor quarterback play to go along with him being basically the sole weapon in that offense outside of DeAndre Swift and maybe Jamal Williams out of the backfield. But you don't have pass catchers to take defenders off of Hockenson. And then this injury is lingering. So I think that if you have Hockenson, you have to just hope that it is the injury that's really causing this. And maybe it is the injury and then everything will be good once he's healthy. But I don't think that you can really do anything with him right now. You probably just still have to play him because the tight end position sucks. Right. And then on top of that, though, you can't really sell him because people are going to look at his recent production and say, I don't want this. And
right.
TJ Hockenson, we know has a ceiling. We know that he can bounce back. So I would hold tight with Hockenson, but also be concerned. I think you can do both of those things.
Let's talk to Deante here. Are Nyheim Hines, Tyson Williams, or Latavius Murray droppable? Looking to pick up Devonta, Booker, and a defense. Latavius is operating as lead back for the Ravens. Isn't getting targets, but is getting some work. Tyson Williams didn't do a whole lot last night, even when he was active. Nyheim Hines losing work not only to Jonathan Taylor, but also to Marlon Mack at times as well. So what's your assessment of those 3 guys?
Part of me feels like they were trying to feature Marlon Mack a little bit for a trade.
They did the same thing the game before too. So
yeah.
I think that you're correct, but they've done it for multiple games now, which is kind of annoying.
Yeah. I mean, maybe they were like, oh man, there were a lot of running back injuries, on Sunday. So we're going to just see if we can get Marlon Mack. And Marlon Mack looked good, all things considered too. I think of those 3, I probably, if it's a PPR format, I like Hines the most. I don't think that we can really try. I think both of us would agree that Tyson Williams has probably been the best running back in that backfield this year. But not
John Harbaugh doesn't think that. So it doesn't matter
right. So it doesn't matter. I mean, at the end of the day, you hope that talent wins out at the running back position, which is why we do evaluate talent at the running back position. But at the end of the day, coaches are the ones that are making the choices to put these guys on the field or not. And if they trust Latavius Murray more, even if he looks like he's running in mud, you have to prefer Latavius over Tyson. So I would rank them Hines, Latavius, Tyson right now.
Same for me as well. Let's talk to Joseph. Are you still holding Trey Lance? Lance is on a bye this week. His knee is banged up and Jimmy Garoppolo might be back for week 7. So would you hang on to Trey Lance, given that if he does start, he's a very good fantasy asset, or are you cutting bait to get that roster spot?
Yeah, he's banged up too. There was that announcement like during the Monday night or before the Monday night game that Trey Lance had, I think it's a knee issue. Knee sprain. So, you're running into that. So I don't think Trey Lance is going to start in the short term. They're going to take their time with that, I would assume. So let's just say that Jimmy Garoppolo gets like another 3 weeks in him. They have a bye this week. I mean, it's one of those things where it depends entirely on your league and your league structure. If it's a league that's fairly shallow that, like look at your waiver wire right now. And if like Darrell Williams is on your waiver wire, then it's probably a normal to shallow league. Whereas, I'm in a lot of leagues right now where Darrell Williams is already rostered, and in those kinds of leagues, your bench space, you can afford to hold on to a guy like Trey Lance just because there's not that many good alternatives on the waiver wire. But if a guy like Kadarius Toney is still out there, Darrell Williams, Devonta Booker, those are the kind of guys that, that's probably a normal league. I shouldn't say shallow because a lot of leagues still have those guys out there.
Yeah.
And so as a result, I think that you can drop Trey Lance in a league like that.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Think of what you're dropping him for. If you're dropping for something good, do it. Like that's kind of the calculus there. Let's talk to Jack. Rest of season, Amari Cooper, Chase Claypool, Juju Smith-Schuster now done for the year, most likely for Pittsburgh. Opens up targets, but it's also Dak Prescott versus Ben Roethlisberger. So a couple different factors at play here. Who do you prefer between those 2 guys?
Yeah, let's break this down from like the standpoint of team and then player. Team wise, the Cowboys might score like twice as many points as the Steelers from here on out. So we know that the Cowboys offense is a little bit better. I mean, realistically, we could end up seeing the Steelers maybe have a little bit more passing volume from here on out, just because of the way that the teams are structured right now and how well they're playing. But and then you look at the players, and the reason I'm saying that is because then you look at the players. is the target share projection between Amari Cooper and Chase Claypool from here on out that significantly different? Like maybe without Juju, we see Claypool in like the 23% range, maybe the 24% range, which would be great. But Amari Cooper is probably still going to be even when Michael Gallup returns, probably going to be in like the 22% range. So given the fact that he's playing in that better offense, I know that, he's been banged up and he's dealt with his injuries. Chase Claypool has too. I would just prefer to lean towards, even if this was like a tiebreaker thing, which I still think it's not, but I think you just lean towards the guy who's playing in the better offense.
And even when he's been banged up, Amari's still getting production, which I think is really encouraging for him too.
Let's talk to Ben. By the way, I like Claypool, so I don't want that to be taken as like me not liking Claypool from here on out. I love Amari. Claypool. Yeah, it's more pro Amari. Yeah,
I agree. Okay, Ben is in Superflex League. He's got Justin Fields as his quarterback too, with Matt Ryan on a bye. Is Geno Smith worth an ad? So Geno, we know he's been a backup for a reason for a while, but goes in a situation where he has Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, which is a lot better than like whatever he had with the Jets. I think he was before Eric Decker when he was starting back in the day. So the situation around is much better. What are you doing here with Geno if you need a quarterback in Superflex?
Yeah, I mean, like, let's just be real with this right now with Justin Fields. They're not running Justin Fields. The reason you drafted Justin Fields or you have Justin Fields in your fantasy team is because you wanted the rushing production. And through his 3 starts, this is a stat that I tweeted out yesterday, or maybe Sunday, but through his 3 starts, he has 25 rushing yards. Tom Brady over the last 3 weeks has 30 rushing yards. I mean, like how insane is it that Tom Brady, like I'm visibly angry right now because it's so ridiculous that you have a guy who ran a 4.40 at his pro day and Tom Brady has more rushing yards than him through Justin Fields' first 3 weeks as a starter. So, I mean, you have to look at it from that standpoint and then look at it from the perspective that they're not throwing a lot. Justin Fields, they're averaging 19 pass attempts and 19 targets per game, which, if you want to compare that to the Buccaneers, just for fun, the Buccaneers have thrown the ball, have averaged 44 targets, team targets per game. 19
throws in a quarter for them.
Yeah, exactly. Like 19 is so small. I mean, Devonta Adams over the last 3 weeks has 45 targets. The Bears as a team have 57. I mean, it's just, they're just not throwing the ball. He is throwing the ball down the field at a decent enough clip. But, Justin Fields without the rushing production is, I mean, like he's worse than Ben Roethlisberger, like from a fantasy standpoint. And so you can't really feel good about that. So Geno Smith without Russell Wilson, because of what we've seen from Justin Fields. Now, look, we have to hope that they eventually let Justin Fields escape the pocket more, run a little bit more. The last 2 weeks, we haven't seen him in a negative game script where he could scramble a little bit more and throw the ball a little bit more. So be cognizant of that too. I'm not saying drop Justin Fields in the Superflex format, but Geno Smith is entering a situation, like you said, that's not bad. I mean, he looked good against one of the best defenses in the league this past week. He has 2 of the best wide receivers in the game to throw to. And the system itself can work for him because he's a mobile quarterback similar to Russell Wilson, and he can get some rushing juice from a fantasy perspective. So, I would try to add Geno Smith if I have Justin Fields as like my QB2 and try to keep both of them in a super flex league, but I would definitely be trying to add Geno Smith this week.
I think the good thing for Justin Fields is that, like you said, they've not been in a negative script yet. And as he gets more comfortable, Bill Lazor may be more okay letting him rip a bit more. We're not there yet. They did not he played well in week 4 and they still didn't open things up in week 5. So we're not there yet, but there is a path to that. We're not there yet though. So I think that if you can get that Geno production for now, that is a worthwhile situation to target. Let's talk to Andre. We talked about TJ Hockenson before. What about Dawson Knox? Dawson Knox, 3 deep targets on Sunday, coverage optional, getting red zone work as well. What are your thoughts on Dawson Knox going forward?
It's one of those situations in fantasy football where, if you only analyze the player, if you solely look at the player, yeah, he's a sell. Like, yeah, Dawson Knox isn't going to keep this up through the rest of the season, but you have to look at what the market is saying. And I guarantee you that the market is not sitting there saying Dawson Knox is a top 3 tight end in fantasy football or top 4 tight end in fantasy football. So, it's one of those situations where, yeah, hypothetically you could sell him, but I don't think that you're going to get any sort of like reasonable market for him. And honestly, I kind of group, he's scoring points in a very different way than like Dalton Schultz is, but these guys who have emerged and come out of nowhere and are producing like tight end ones, you have to give this context to the tight end position, and the tight end position is terrible. And so both of those guys could be tight end ones from here on out. Like I think Dawson Knox is a tight end 1 from here on out. He has the right environment for him to do well. And the tight end position, you only need 3 or 4 targets to be relevant. if those targets are highly valued targets and high leverage targets. So, I think Dawson Knox, if you only look at the player, yeah, sure, he's a sell from the standpoint that his production is not going to maintain at this rate, but he's not a sell from the standpoint of when you look at what the market is saying. I still think that the market is probably still too low on Dawson Knox just because people don't think it's real.
Right. And like we saw from Robert Tonyan last year, like if you get targets like that in a very good offense, you can be a viable fantasy option the entire year at tight end. So if you're going to get a legit return for him, sure, but the odds you get that are pretty small, most likely. The Lorax, Myles Gaskin got dropped. Would you prioritize him over Darrell Williams, Khalil Herbert, and Devontae Booker?
Man, that's a really interesting question, actually. So I had Myles Gaskin as a hold this week on 15 transactions. I just wanted to talk about Gaskin because I felt like we would get some questions, and I would get some questions this week about Gaskin. Is he going to do what he did this past week? No. He's not going to have like a 25+% target share every week. He's not going to have 10 targets. They're not even going to have a pass-heavy script like they had against Tampa Bay. A team where teams have just given up running the football against Tampa Bay. So that's really what these run games against the Buccaneers have become. It's just these short passes, whether it's to the running back or to wide receivers to stay closer to the line of scrimmage. You're going to see teams attack Tampa Bay in that way. The thing with Gaskin, though, that's interesting is, number one, he played well. And when players play well, you have to think about how our coach is going to react. And maybe coaches look at this and they say, well, maybe we should throw Gaskin on the field a little bit more, because up until that point, his highest game in terms of snap share was like 60%. He was lower than that in a lot of games this year. I mean, that was his high. This past week, it was 68.5%. So he's on the field a lot more than what we've seen, from weeks 1 through 4. That's something that you can latch onto and say, well, maybe they do utilize Myles Gaskin a little bit more, and they have a pretty favorable schedule upcoming. So, we should probably at least want Myles, not throw him on the waiver wire. I think that this is like so totally fluky. It was somewhat fluky, but not so totally fluky. It depends to me. I think that if you look at those players, that you're referencing, Darrell Williams, Khalil Herbert, and Devontae Booker, I don't think Khalil Herbert's in this conversation, so we can kind of knock him out. And I like Darrell Williams more than Devontae Booker right now. I don't like these rumors about Marlon Mack potentially going to Kansas City. I know they just got Elijah McGuire, so maybe that means that they're not going to go after Marlon Mack, which would be great. I think Darrell Williams would probably be the 1A regardless, but I like Darrell Williams more than Devontae Booker because I think that there's a chance that the CEH injury lingers more. He's already on IR, so it's already going to be 3 weeks, but it could linger more than the Saquon Barkley injury could, and it's just a better situation in general for Darrell Williams. So I prioritize Williams more than Booker. So this comes down to Gaskin versus Williams. And I would say, do you need a long-term option, which I think you could say Myles Gaskin would be the guy, or do you need immediate production, which would be Darrell Williams? That's how I would handle this.
The one complicating factor here is I don't think the Dolphins have a bye after their London trip, which is really strange. They're in London this week, and I think that they don't have their bye right away, which is a weird choice. But so you would at least get Gaskin in the short term a bit as well, which may help if you're in the short term versus long term equation there. So talk to Alvin. How much of your waiver budget would you place on Ramondre Stevenson and Devontae Booker? You talked about Booker a bit there. Saquon Barkley not on IR yet, and it sounds like there's a chance he could be back decently soon. Stevenson, more of a speculative type thing. Damian Harris is fine, but also fumbled and potentially might have gotten benched in addition to the injury this past week. So what are you looking at with Stevenson and Booker here?
Yeah, I like Stevenson as an ad this week, for the reason you talk. He had that ribs injury that doesn't sound that bad, so I'm not really that concerned about that, but he did have those fumbling issues. He's now fumbled in 2 really, really important, like key parts of the field and times in the game against Miami in week 1 and then Houston this past week. As he was trying to score a touchdown. So I like Stevenson as like a, no one's really thinking about him kind of ad, at least in like a more casual and normal league. So I would say you can get Stevenson probably for like 5 to 10, maybe 10% of your budget this week and feel fine about that. With Booker, all of this depends on league size, as we say every single week. It all depends on league size and what your waiver wire looks like and the size of your bench and all that. If we're just talking about like a 12-team league with like 6 guys on your bench, I think that Booker is probably in the 15 to 25% range. I think it depends on what do you need. If you don't really need Devontae Booker, if you don't really need a running back, you should still try to add him just because he's valuable. But I would go more towards the bottom end of that range and go more towards the 15%. But if you do need him, I can make the argument even to go to the 30% range if you really, really need him. If you have Saquon or something and you're a little bit worried, I can make that argument. But I would say, don't go crazy. This sort of reminds me of some of the other waiver wire ads that we've had this season where people just go completely, like even like Chuba Hubbard, when people just went like absolutely nuts with Hubbard. And it's like, yeah, I get it. Like Booker's going to step in. I mean, Booker saw Saquon Barkley work usage without Saquon Barkley in that game against Dallas. So like, I get it, guys. I mean, he's going to be a very usable piece over the next couple of weeks, but this is sort of like a Chuba Hubbard situation where I feel like people assume that like Barkley's going to be out for like 8 weeks or something like that. When the timeline is more conservative than that and looks a little bit better than that. So, I'd say don't go above like the 25% range for Booker.
It also seems very likely that Mike Glennon is starting, and that does downgrade the outlook for Booker as well, assuming that it's just like a 1 week thing. For Saquon, Deante, would you trade and have PPR Chase Claypool for Mark Andrews or Chase Claypool and Latavius Murray for Chase Edmonds? Mark Andrews just went off last night, so I don't know if this is just like recency bias, but like I kind of want the Mark Andrews side of this one. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean these trades are fine. I don't really have a preference, like a super strong preference. You're trading Claypool at a time where he's coming off a big game, obviously, but I'm expecting him to see not necessarily a spike in target share, but a more consistent target share week in and week out. I mean, he's already seen no less than a 22% target share in each of his last 3 games, so he's being utilized in a pretty decent way. It's just that there's always these question marks about like what happens in 12 personnel, 2 wide receiver sets with Pittsburgh. And now that Juju Smith-Schuster's out, there's no question that we're going to see Chase Claypool, be on the field in 2 wide receiver sets, which is great. So he can see more upside. So if you need a tight end, sure, I think that's a fair trade. If you need a running back, I think that's fair enough too. I mean, this is really Claypool for Chase Edmonds because I don't see Latavius Murray as this like interesting or meaningful piece.
Right.
I think it's fine. I mean, Edmonds was banged up. He didn't have a great game this past week, but yeah, I think that both trades are reasonable and fair. It just depends on what your need is.
Let's talk to Amanja over on YouTube. Would you trade Dak Prescott and Darrell Williams for Kyler Murray in a single quarterback 12-person PPR league? So you're getting an upgrade at quarterback. You're giving up a piece who is not like a huge needle mover to do it. Do you view Kyler as being that big of an upgrade over Dak, or what are you seeing here?
Yeah, I think this is fine too. If you have decent enough running back depth and that you're not going to start Darrell Williams while CEH is out, let's even assume that CEH is out for 4 weeks. Maybe you get 2 pretty good performances from Darrell Williams in those 4 weeks. Yeah, I mean, this is an upgrade at the quarterback position. I typically don't really care about going for an upgrade at the quarterback position, especially when you have Dak Prescott. But
right.
I think this is reasonable enough. I think that looking at this trade, it feels like one of those situations where the team that's giving up Dak Prescott and Darrell Williams probably is pretty loaded. Like it's feeling pretty good right now. And if you can get Kyler there, then you're in a good spot.
The one thing I'd say, Amanjad, is I would check out the injury report Wednesday because Kyler's shoulder was kind of weird on Sunday. So if he's a full go in practice Wednesday, I feel a lot better about that one. CJ and half PPR was offered Aaron Jones for Austin Ekeler. Would you make this deal? Again, could be recency bias, but like I feel like with Aaron Jones losing some red zone work to AJ Dillon this past week, which was really weird and really frustrating, a little bit wary of Aaron Jones right now, and I feel like I'd rather have Ekeler here. Where do you land on this one?
Yeah, man, Eckler's it. After I saw Ekeler get the goal line work that he got in week 1 against Washington, I was all in on Ekeler. I mean, it was just a buy high. I don't care. Get Austin Ekeler. He's seeing perfect usage behind a good offensive line and a good offense with a stud quarterback. I know that you can make a similar argument for Aaron Jones, but there's no AJ Dillon in that backfield. So I'm going to go with Austin Ekeler over Aaron Jones.
All right, let's talk to DJ. Should I go after Devonta Booker over Chuba Hubbard? I don't think Chuba's probably someone I'd be looking to add right now, given CMC's going to play this week. So Devonta over Chuba, correct?
Yep.
Okay, let's talk to Jack, who is asking. I scrolled past the comment. Here we go. Wow, I scrolled way past it. Okay, rest of the season. Tyler Lockett or Deante Johnson. So Deante getting more targets now, but Geno Smith also starting for Lockett. So what are you seeing here?
I think you have to go with Deante Johnson because of the injury. And not only that, but the injury to Juju Smith-Schuster. Deante had a really weird game this past week where he had that big touchdown and then he had like an 8% target share in that game. I would not expect that week in and week out, but yeah, I mean, Deante Johnson is great. He's a lock. no pun intended. And the thing that scares me about Lockett is the deep ball ability of Geno Smith and that connection and whether or not that's there. Lockett over the first couple of weeks when he was just completely destroying fantasy football, he was almost a large portion of that, and those points that are being scored were happening on 15 plus air yard throws, 20 plus air yard throws. So is that going to be there with Geno Smith? I mean, you're going from one of the best deep ball passers and best quarterbacks in the league to, a backup. I mean, we can think that Geno Smith is a good backup, but he's still a backup. So yeah, I'm going to go with Deante Johnson, even though Ben Roethlisberger is also playing like a backup.
Okay, let's give Justin a temperature check here on Antonio Gibson. Banged up with that, apparently a broken leg, which is pretty wild. But he's still producing and he's getting a lot of carries, getting his 2 targets every game. What are your thoughts on Antonio Gibson right now?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Anytime that you're looking at a player and you say, well, his usage, there's question marks around that usage, but he's finding the end zone a lot. Typically, that's not the best sign in the world. And I'm not saying that Antonio Gibson's not an RB2 at least. I mean, he's at least a mid-range, high-end RB2. The problem with Gibson, with the usage is that he's not seeing work as a receiver. They're still using J.D. McKissic pretty heavily as a receiver. He has like a 12% target share since week 1. Antonio Gibson has a 6% target share since week 1 per game. He has 2 targets in every game since week 1. That's just not a lot of work through the air. And that's with a changing quarterback. And there's a lot of data that suggests that quarterbacks drive at least a portion of the kind of looks that running backs get. But it's a combination of like Taylor Heineke being back there and also their use of J.D. McKissic. So temperature check on Antonio Gibson. If I were to, I would say he's mostly a hold, but if I were to lean one way, I might lean sell a little bit more than buy, but I would wait until after this week because they get Kansas they get Kansas City. So don't go selling Antonio Gibson right now because that game could be very, very high scoring.
Antonio Gibson against Daniel Sorensen is going to be fun. Let's talk to Andre quickly here about the Ravens. Can we safely say the Ravens have become much more pass-heavy offense? We've seen recently, Marquise Brown, is he a top 15 wide receiver going forward? They will get Rashad Bateman likely back in week 6. So that's likely to happen here, but also their run game isn't as good as it was before. I think you combine that with Lamar Jackson just playing out of his mind as a passer. And I feel like we can bump up their baseline pass rate a bit, but I don't want to go too crazy on it. So JJ, what do you think about this Ravens passing offense going forward?
Yeah, I actually think what's driving it most is that the defense sucks. The defense is just not playing well, right? I mean, we have not seen a Ravens defense like this with Lamar Jackson under center ever. And so because that defense is so bad, there's more negative game scripts, and that's forcing them to throw the ball more. And they're still not the most pass heavy team in the league, but they are throwing it a little bit more. And like you mentioned, the Rashad Bateman, his return to injury or from injury is gonna hurt Marquise Brown at least a little bit. But again, I feel like Marquise Brown is another one of those guys where the production doesn't match the way people view him in fantasy. You wouldn't be able to get, if you had Marquise Brown and you're I want to sell him right now, you wouldn't be able to get a top 15 wide receiver for him probably because people don't see what he's doing as sustainable. And it's not totally sustainable. He's scored now in 9 of his last 11 games, and that should be 10 because one of those games was that Detroit game where he dropped 8 touchdowns. And so yeah, I mean, I think that Marquise Brown is probably a top 20 wide receiver, maybe not 15, top 20 wide receiver moving forward. I don't think that's that crazy to think. And a lot of it is driven by, I think, not only Lamar Jackson just being dope, but the fact that defense is just so it's just not playing well at all.
Andre, what I would do right now is go to Marquise Brown's FanDuel player pool or player page, click on him, and then check out the yardage numbers recently. It's not just touchdowns. The yardage has been amazing and consistent. And that's new. So I feel like we should be bumping him up too. Let's talk to Nick. Should I prioritize Jacoby Myers or Rondale Moore off the waiver wire? I'll try to get both, but only can use priority on one. Rondale Moore did see an increase in his route rate this past week. Max Williams got hurt too, so we could see some more 4 receiver sets of the Cardinals. He took away some snaps from Christian Kirk and 3 receiver sets too. So who would you rather have, Jacoby Myers or Rondale Moore?
I don't like cars. I'm not a car guy, but I would say that Jacoby Myers is like a Honda Civic. He's fine. You can get Jacoby Myers. You're gonna be fine. And look, I used to have a Honda Civic. I love that thing. Rondale Moore, I don't have an analogy for this. I don't know what a good car comparison for Rondale Moore would be, but he's not a Honda Civic. He's got a lot more. He's got a lot more upside, a lot more juice. He's a lot more fun. I think that Rondale Moore is the ad off the waiver wire, because in a league like this where both those guys are on the waiver wire, you have to assume that most teams are good. It's probably a shallow league. You need more upside on your bench. So I'm going to go with Rondale Moore over Jacoby Myers. I might go with Rondale Moore in most leagues over Jacoby Myers at this point.
Rondale Moore is allowed to score touchdowns. Jacoby Myers is not. I think that's a pretty easy discussion there for sure. Let's talk to DJ. You talked about this one in 15 transactions, JJ. Is it time to drop Trey Sermon and replace him with other running back stashes like Khalil Herbert? Maybe not Jamar Jefferson, but like in general, would you drop Sermon for a running back stash?
Yeah, Jamar Jefferson's not someone that I would really add, because he's still number 3 on the depth chart. But
he's number 4. Godwin Igwe-Buike is the number 3 running back. He's strictly special teams. Used to play safety, but Godwin Igwe-Buike, go Cats, number 3 running back.
That's actually I totally forgot. So the thing about the thing with Trey Sermon is he's basically a handcuff now, because we know that they utilize Elijah Mitchell as the lead back, as the 1A in that offense. We now have, like, I know that we have these priors from August as to how we felt about the San Francisco backfield. And I know that they kind of lied to us, because they used Trey Sermon even as the starter in the preseason at some point. And then all that stuff happened with that 2 weeks in between the last preseason game and the start of the season, week and a half, whatever. And then week 1 happens and he was a surprise inactive. But since week 1, every action that they've taken has shown us that they like Elijah Mitchell more than Trey Sermon. Literally every opportunity that Elijah Mitchell has had to see the field over Trey Sermon, he has. And Trey Sermon this past week had 2 snaps. Elijah Mitchell had 40. And it's a situation where I would much rather have Mitchell. And Trey Sermon, we've seen him in action as the starter, wasn't very good in fantasy. He's very average. I mean, he was like an RB3 in fantasy when he was the starter. So we know he's not even a high-end handcuff, and that's why I think you can drop him. Obviously, things can change, and maybe he develops a little bit more. He's a rookie. I get all that, but Elijah Mitchell looks to be the guy in that offense. It makes sense because, like I said, and like we talked about at the beginning of the season, he's like a Raheem Mostert clone. They're like the same kind of player, and that's Kyle Shanahan clearly has a thing for that.
Yeah, Jeff Wilson will be back eventually, but Elijah Mitchell's rest season outlook is pretty good. So I think that Trey Sermon, pretty easy guy to drop for me. That is all that we have here for today on this FanDuel Live Q&A. But as mentioned, we are back once again on Thursday Night Football preview. Brandon Gadula will have that from 4 to 4:30. Then on Friday, we'll have our snake draft 4 to 4:30 to get you set for week number 6. JJ, you can find on Twitter at Late Round QB, and check out the Late Round Podcast by searching for the Late Round Podcast wherever you get your podcast. JJ, we appreciate the time. Good luck to you with waivers this week and in week number 6.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it, man.
All right. I am on Twitter as well at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. Big thank you to Joy Affleck, our video producer, for running the video side of things here today. Thank you, Joy, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck to you with waivers. We'll talk to you once again next week. This has been the Waiver Wire Q&A.